I have huge news for you today because, contrary to popular belief, Midnight is doing a little bit more than just some new talent points and one new spec. And to help you understand that, I'll let the lead combat designer Jade Martin tell you the actual truth. Because when Mr. GM asked him about class reworks, he said this.
Yeah, we'll say that, we do have some planned changes for classes, and I think everyone will be looking forward to it. We're trying not to leave anyone out.
Now, that's not an announcement, but it's close. Changes are coming, and they might be massive, but the good news is that's not just speculation. After reading in between the lines of interviews and scoping out all the information from Gamescom, we figured a few things out. And then, looking at one of the panels, I've got a lot of evidence to back it all up with. I don't expect core class identities to change with huge reworks, but there will be reworks. And looking through them, some classes are getting serious work. And Jade may have quietly told us which ones.
Take a look at the screen. This is what happens whenever you hit an enemy in War Thunder. It is awesome. And obviously, with that, War Thunder is the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made. It's available now for free, PC, console, and even mobile devices. Every vehicle is simulated and modeled to the very last detail, and not just because it's neat, though it absolutely is. It's because it's there in gameplay, right? You are fighting vehicles, not health bars. And that's something so many games I play just let me down on, right? They've got over 2,500 vehicles, and you're going from biplanes, right? The Mark I tank of World War I, all the way up to your F-15, your Abrams, and beyond. I love it. It tickles me. I'm a massive history nut, be that watching Band of Brothers as a kid, watching all of the Laserpig videos in the universe as an adult, and that's why War Thunder is so damn impressive to me. It's all those little things, the sounds, the VFX, the X-ray damage, where you just actually see how you have hit the enemy tank. Have you hit the crew? Which bit have you hit? That is so cool. And it all comes together to create an immersive, authentic military history sort of combat vehicle experience. And unlike others, it is approachable as well, because you can go for the arcade mode, simulator mode, or realistic. And Gaijin have put massive effort into performance, so this is a game that can run on low-end systems as well, and you can play on anything, like PlayStation, Xbox, PC, iOS, Android. I mean, hell, I even remember the first time one of the guys in my team showed me War Thunder on VR. Oh, that was a mind blow. So here's the deal. You can join up for free today at my link, and on PC and console, if you're new or you just haven't played in 6 months, you'll get a massive bonus pack of 100,000 silver lines, 7 days premium, an Eagle of Valor decorator, premium vehicles, and a 50% XP and silver booster.
I'll start with one that isn't quiet. If you're a Death Knight and saw the systems panel, you probably noticed that this is not your talent tree. And as I'm about to show you, it's not just a random placeholder. It looks like it could be the new normal for specs in Midnight. So let's take a look at it. Ignore the shiny new thing at the bottom. That's the new Apex talent, and I'll cover what those are shortly. But for now, focus on the familiar icons, ones that are still there and ones that are missing. I'll skip the working out, so here's the major takeaways. I'm going to use this talent tree to set up my ideas first, and then I'm going to share all the quotes from Jade's interviews that back them up. So let's go. 1. They are removing stacking cooldowns that stack too hard. As an example, Unholy Assault, which was a huge haste buff, is nowhere in sight here. Legion of Souls is missing as well, and the only cooldown we've got is Army of the Dead. That's usually replaced by Raise Abomination, which is down here, and that's on a choice node with Gargoyle. And to me, that implies they'll replace it as well, instead of it being its own thing. They don't need to right now because of tuning, but there is a potential build where Unholy's damage comes from stacking damage from 3 major cooldowns, and it looks like they may now be down to 1. This by itself will make the game easier to balance and ideally way less frustrating. Actually having more base damage from your abilities means you've got more punch outside of your cooldowns, which generally does feel quite good. Thing 2, they're removing buttons. Now that's a side effect from the stuff that I've just mentioned, and I presume it's intended. As an example, no Unholy Assault to press, only one choice of 3 major cooldowns, Army, A-Bomb, or Gargoyle, depending on your build and your playstyle. That speaks for itself. Fewer keybinds and abilities means an easier time learning and playing. 3, they seem to be clustering talents harder for specific builds. all the most important disease talents have been moved from around the tree to just over here on the left. We also see that all the most important minion ones seem to be over here on the right, and that makes it easier to decide on what build you're going to go with. Like, say, with Devourer. Devourer has been said to have two builds. One build is more of a pure caster, the other one is a little more of a melee hybrid. So that Final Fantasy XIV red mage style of jumping in for a melee attack and then back out to do some casting. Now that size of playstyle difference in talents is actually quite new for World of Warcraft. So I can imagine that they'll therefore want to make those builds very obvious for players with how they design the layout of their talents. And that brings me to point 4. They're removing stuff you need add-ons to track. Unholy players may have noticed that Festermite is missing here, and that was arguably the last talent that was keeping wounds extremely relevant. And it was also one of the last things that Unholy needed to put effort into tracking with weak auras. To me, that implies that wounds may even be reworked. The 5th lesson then. They may be simplifying talents for balance. Now this is a less solid thought because they're obviously adding Apex talents and new columns to hero talents, and seeing people's reactions to there being more points and Apex talents, well, yeah, people were kind of worried about talent bloat of things stacking on top of other things. But as an example, removing Festermite, well, that removes one of the most frustrating aspects of balancing Holy. That's because it was a stacking strength modifier that controlled way too much of their damage output. If that's gone, then it seems they will have fewer moving parts to break their maths, all without removing that playstyle, since Gargoyle looks like it may be relevant again. That was their old skill expression talent before it got nerfed. Okay, that was a lot of thoughts and philosophy things, but now let me kind of prove it with words from Blizzard themselves. One of my favorite words recently is approachable, like here from Marcillion and Flame.
And as we move forward into Midnight and beyond, I think we're looking at all of our classes and seeing what we can do to kind of make them, you know, more approachable.
Approachability. That doesn't just mean easier. The context here is making sure that older specs get updates to make sure they match new specs. Essentially to make sure they feel like they are specs within the same video game. Devourer is bringing loads of new things to the game, and they're conscious that not everyone will play it, so they're making sure that most specs will have something to look forward to. Now, Devourer seems like it has two clear builds, the melee hybrid and the pure caster. It looks like they're matching that with Unholy when we take a look at the Unholy talents that we've seen from Midnight. Another point we can match with Unholy is the redesigning of wounds. Marcillion asks about Outlaw Rogue, calling it unplayable without weak auras. And Jade responds saying that for classes like Outlaw or Unholy's wounds, they're looking at that. And the key is, to quote,
is when we look at a class like Outlaw, we look at a class like Unholy DK with managing festering wounds and things like that. Like, those are the types of things that we're looking at and looking to see, do these need to exist? Does this improve gameplay in any capacity? Can we offer you a better experience by redesigning it?
And he then immediately pivots to talk about expansion boundary changes that they can't make during patches. Essentially, when there's a new expansion, that's the time to do huge changes as opposed to just fixing things up and solving problems. Midnight is their chance to make those major changes, ones that avoid weak aura reliance and are frustrating to play around, and that explains to me the loss of Festermite, because it was a pain to track. Now in Outlaw's case, that may mean a clearer roll the bones, for one example. And this all makes sense in the context of us knowing Blizzard are moving away from us needing weak auras and all the UI changes, which I'll get to in a video tomorrow. But to understand more of what Jade means, we've got to hop over to an interview with Mr. GM where it was talked about in a different context. Talking about reworks, he almost admits that the expansion will let them simplify classes that need it. Here's the quote.
We're looking at classes, we're looking at what we're asking you to do. Sometimes it can be a little bit too much, right? We recognize that some classes are harder to play than others, and while some players really like that skill expression, I think we're maybe like getting to the tipping point for a lot of these, and we want to look at how we can make classes feel more approachable.
There's the word approachable again. He immediately follows up by saying that they still want the skill expression that players like. So basically, the classic easy to learn, hard to master. And that explains Unholy Assault and Festermite being dropped. It may also explain Gargoyle being prominent again, and it definitely explains the builds being way more apparent within the talent tree. And this quote shows just how big it may be.
Soon we'll have some blog posts prepared and to talk about what kind of our class philosophy and design philosophies are going to be going into Midnight.
Yes, they have entire new philosophies, and I think it's obvious because they actually would need them now. They're doing the add-on purge, right? They have the one button assistant, the rotation assistant, and we know that they're doing loads of UI revamps and features basically meant to replace the need for add-ons. And in some previous communications, they've made it very clear that they will be willing to kinda kill the ridiculous shenanigans that things like weak auras can do. Now, if that's the direction the game is moving to, then classes will need to change in line with that. That's because class and boss design has happened with Blizzard knowing that people use these add-ons. But that's enough for philosophy. Let's just hope that the rogues really do get the love that they're overdue. But it's time to move on because we've got to talk about new talents. Alright then, new talents. We don't have a huge amount to go on here, but we do have a lot of important information. We're going to be getting 10 new talent points as we level up. 3 of them are going to go into our class tree, and there are going to be no broad changes made to class trees. Those additional 3 points just mean we'll be able to pick up some things that we couldn't pick before. As an example, Ret Paladin is one of those, where it sounds like you'll be able to pick up some more off-healing or a little bit more crowd control. 3 will then go into our hero talents. Each hero talent is getting a new column that looks terrible on their testing screenshot here, but they obviously didn't show us what any of these things are, so we just can't really say anything. Probably it's just more flavorful passive damage or survivability, but the last 4 on the spec tree are where things do get interesting. We can put them wherever we want, but we'll probably want to put them into the new Apex talent. And here are the examples that they've shown off. It's a big icon at the bottom of your tree that eats 4 points. Now, the first point usually activates the effect. The next 2 then buff it a little, and the last is usually some form of other notable change. Now, the Devourer example makes their big finisher always crit. The next 2 are small buffs, and then the last one gives you an instant proc of it whenever you activate Metamorphosis. We've also seen the Evoker one, which is rather similar. The first Apex talent point gives you a proc that upgrades and changes Reversion to be a big smart AoE heal. The next 2 buff it a little, and then the last one buffs your Dream Breath massively and guarantees the proc. Those are the only ones that we've seen, but they do follow some key principles. One is that they're not new abilities, they rather change existing ones. And I think it would be a bit silly if they pruned talent trees just to add in a whole bunch more stuff. Which makes me think they've got a fairly solid direction in mind, right? That they're pushing towards with all these things. The second, then, is that these are impactful in the same way. Obviously, they can't throw procs on absolutely everything. The Devourer one feels smart, though. Guaranteed crits don't really matter in the long run on a boss, but they do matter out in world content. You press the same button, but you'll actually feel it in the health bar. Mobs in the world or in delves will disappear instead of just dipping low. That will feel quite good. That's what Blizzard seems to consider impactful. And what we see in the 4th talent point is a good example as well. It moves 1 more cast to the start. Not a new button or a proc, just a bit of reordering that will feel good. So, it won't be long until we get these blog posts and, of course, well, our hands on things with the alpha. And right now I'll say I'm cautiously optimistic. I mean, Jade is clearly a passionate guy, came across fantastically in the interviews. And that does go a long way, I think. And it's also obvious they've got a solid philosophy on what Midnight Combat is going to look like, because these class changes aren't happening in a vacuum. They're happening alongside massive changes to the game's UI and changes to boss design philosophy, which I'll say at least thus far in what I've played with 11.2, is pretty damn good. And if there are as many changes as he's implying, it is going to be good. And a special thanks to our sponsor, War Thunder. It's free to play in PC, Xbox, PS5, iOS, and Android. Now's the perfect time to give it a shot. And if you're new or just haven't been back in 6 months, hop on PC or console to claim a massive free bonus pack using my link. Look, I know that a full new class is an exciting thing, but a lot of us do have our mains, and if we're getting Apex talents, we're getting reworks that really improve those mains, that is going to be exciting. And I should note, they have hinted that we'll get another spec. Like another new spec at some time in the future, in and around midnight in The Last Titan. Who knows, maybe it'll even be during a patch. And speaking of patches, there is something rather suspicious. You may have noticed that the rate of class changes really slowed down after patch 11.1. I think that's almost certainly because of changing design philosophies and the work that's going into Midnight, so that does bode fairly well to me. it actually appears they will have had time to cook. At the very least, I'll say I am cautiously very optimistic. And with that said, if you want an overview of expansion features, check out this video now.